Emotions in leadership. And of course now, especially and most likely Min will say, well, emotions shouldn't be around leadership. It's all about getting the job done, getting your work done, isn't it? Well, on the one hand, you're of course right. On the other hand, when you see what people really take into account when they make decisions to work for you, not to work with you, or if they stay on board or if they might leave, emotions become extremely important. I'll just give you an example. And you now probably have seen, and this is not about football, you now have seen that football season comes to an end in many countries, and congratulations again to Liverpool for winning Premier League very early. Surprisingly, in Germany, Bayern Munich again became German champion for the 8th time in a row. But we have a scandal. We have a scandal in Germany about a manager of the control board of directors of FC Schalke 04. That's a football club. One of the leading figures in their control supervisory board is Mr. Tönnies, and Mr. Tönnies has a meat producing factory which had a coronavirus scandal. He had people coming over from Romania living, let's say, in very debatable circumstances, studios with 2, 4, 6 or 8 people in there. Surprise, surprise, there was a spike in corona and suddenly whole constituencies had to be in a lockdown again. And that for some people meant after everything was opened up again and now you finally could go for your vacations. Sorry, not for you. We get back to lockdown and there will be no vacation for you, especially as people now know where you come from in Germany. Addresses are registered. Often even the holiday homes refuse to accept people from that area. And now, just a couple of hours ago, they again had the lockdown officially announced. So now different areas have the right to deny you access to their venues. And not even that was the scandal, not even the inhuman conditions. One of the main scandals was that this person, Mr. Tönnies, made racist statements during the annual meeting of the board of directors, many shareholders there, and of course the fans were there who are members of the club. And Mr. Tönnies said, I don't want to repeat the statement word by word, but let's just say he was fabulating about the Africans and their manner of reproduction. You honestly can't make this up. Welcome to Germany and welcome again to another qualified decision who should be in charge in football. And again, of course, now you see there are fan protests going on. And the funny thing, not the funny thing, the very surprising thing is normally you can see football fans running around, yelling around, oh, the rich, it's all about the rich, bad people. And when we saw interviews on a website called sport1.de, suddenly you saw people were very calm. And people said, look at this man and look at our area where every 4th fan and every 2nd player has a background in immigration. And this man who openly made a racist statement is still there, and we fans have to pay for his failing, not only with his company and the scandal and corona, but also seeing the damage done to the brand, to the club. And all this happens with our money. So people were very reasonable, but always referring to the emotions. And that's what we're going to talk about today. You think that your work as a leader is all about getting the job done and facts. That's one share of it. That's one part of it. But emotions are more important than you think. And by the way, we are, especially in Europe, but also in the US, we are extremely good in demonizing emotions and normally connecting them to female people. You may have heard, oh, females are too emotional. One of the many unacceptable statements when you just want to get rid of someone who's obviously more qualified to do the job, but you only want to win the race to get the job based on arbitrary statements. And when you see these kind of misbehaviors, and by the way, in Germany with that manager, we had an official investigation by the German Football Federation, and they came to the conclusion that yes, the statement about the Africans and their reproduction manners. By the way, professionals and scientists talk about generative behavior, but without being racist, just looking into facts. That manager was ruled guilty by the control committee of the German Football Federation, and they came to the conclusion, yes, it was racist, but he is not a racist. Surprise, the whole control mechanism was based on white men from a certain age judging over another white man of a certain age, and they came to the, let's say, softest conclusion they could ever come to, trying to get away with it, and again, it didn't go down too well. for obvious reasons. And we have that across the pond as well. When you see the mayor of St. Louis, just recently read out names and addresses of people who protested. And that is a massive violation of privacy laws. When you see people have a right to protest, and you have the right to protest, Black Lives Matter, whatever you want to protest, you have the right to protest. And you have the right to protest without being called out by name and address by your mayor. But still, this just happened. And people were referring, of course, to someone offending the law, but people more, of course, and again, we see the importance of emotions here. People more refer to what the consequences might be emotionally for all these people and how they might feel intimidated to exercise their democratic right in the future. And now, of course, and suddenly it all took off a bit, and we again needed big brands, huge corporates to make the first step after Facebook again and again decided not to touch Donald Trump's accounts and postings and all the different hateful messages. Now, brands made the decision and said, Mr. Zuckerberg, Facebook, we are not going to make any kind of advertising anymore on your social media platforms. The quarterly revenue of Facebook alone can be up to 20 billion, and that means that when they stop doing these advertising, you harm Facebook at the point where they are the weakest, and I mean the stream of revenue. And I'm not talking about small brands doing this. If we look on the long lists of companies who say we're not going to do any advertising anymore on social media, means Facebook, Instagram, etc. We have Verizon on that list, Unilever, Upwork, very well-known platform, Starbucks, known to anyone, and of course Levi Strauss. Many of you will even have purchased these brands in the past. Honda, Hershey's, Eddie Bauer, Diageo, Denny's, Coca-Cola, Ben & Jerry's. So many major brands decided that they step away from social media, although it's their major platform to reach out to their supporters. And of course, there was a factual basis for that, where they said, not dealing with Donald Trump, we don't want to be around on the same platform, which doesn't stick to obvious standards we want to have. And of course, these non-existing standards violate also the diversity guidelines and the professional guidelines of these brands. Suddenly people realize, emotions aren't that unimportant. Because what these brands say, they say, it becomes such a hateful platform with so much hate around. We don't want to have our brand around the emotional experience of that amount of hate. And now we have to talk about what are typical myths when it comes to emotions in leadership and how to do it right. So 3 steps which are misperceptions, and 3 aspects what is completely wrong when you think about emotions. So step 1, aspect number 1 when it comes to emotions in leadership: facts win. Facts do not win in the first place. When we had this manager with the meat producing plant and this whole factory which creates thousands and thousands of jobs, which normally, especially in quite tough areas, make you very popular because you keep people working, you keep people's family having an income. And suddenly you have this corona scandal, the whole area goes into lockdown again, and the CEO, who this person is, Mr. Tönnies, had nothing better to say. Yes, I do apologize, but we also have to see it's an existential crisis for my company. Well, that is true, but maybe we now talk about the victims of your actions rather than you as someone who has a private wealth of about $2 billion, talking about where the existential crisis happens, because there is no existential crisis that really can hit you anymore. So the wrong perception number 1 is facts win. Facts are not unimportant, but addressing the emotion is very important, and we get to that when we talk about how to do it properly. So misperception number 1, facts win. Misperception number 2, not talking about it makes it disappear. That only works when you are not a person of public interest. So when you've done something wrong, and maybe you are on a very small level, you are known in a very small association that is not relevant to general society, when you don't talk about that, it will disappear sooner or later. Also, when you're not a person of public interest and you don't want to become one, no one can force you to become one, and no one can force you to make a public statement. If people try to do that, they again act immorally, of course, massively immorally. So wrong perception number 1, facts win. Wrong perception number 2, not talking about it will make it disappear. When you are a major brand, somewhere in the millions and billions of euros or dollars or yen or British pound, whatever currency you work in, when you are in that area, you have to address the issue publicly. And misperception number 3 is emotions are irrelevant, it's only about the facts. So the facts are important, but the facts are not the thing that people will remember. People will forgive what you told them. People will never forget how you made them feel. People still remember, when I talk to especially young people in the United States, people still remember how they felt when one or the other president was elected. Moments of hope, moments of despair, moments of uprising, moments of feeling in power that you can change the world, or moments of that you think that your whole future now comes to an end. Emotions are not irrelevant. So the main 3 misperceptions are: number 1, facts win. Number 2, not talking about it will make it disappear. And number 3, emotions are irrelevant because it's only about the facts. 3 major misperceptions. And now we have to talk about 3 aspects how to do it better. Step number 1, address the emotion. And you address the emotion first. And that is something which, at least a bit, that manager, that owner from that multi-billion euro meat production company did right. He asked for an apology. Unfortunately, then adding, oh, we have an existential crisis of my company. That is not the point here. That's a factual aspect, which is true, but people know that already, and now they want to talk about what you have done wrong and how it affects their lives. So step 1, address the emotions. Step number 2, when you then come to the factual side, you need to reduce complexity. Because there is a high complexity in today's business world. When we say, oh, we have a spike in coronavirus, and then we had a subcontractor, and the subcontractor again got people from Romania working in Germany, because then you can get around minimum wage, and then they rented different kind of housings, and then people suddenly lived in studios with 2, 4, 6, 8 people, and then some of them got coronavirus, and because they were all living together so closely, then of course it spiked because of very, very challenging and of course often unacceptable situations of personal hygiene and the hygiene they have in the places where they, etc. So people don't want to hear this. When you say there is a fact which people need to know about, then you need to reduce complexity. And I'm going to give you a good example of how to do it right just in a minute. So step number 1, address the emotion. Step number 2, when you have facts, reduce the complexity. And by the way, that does not allow you to lie. Just tell people certain facts which are easy to understand and easy to digest. And it must be able, so people must be able to understand it without a massive amount of background knowledge. Because when people say, oh, I don't understand it, they will not say, I don't understand it, I do my research. Most people will say, I don't get it, I just don't like this brand anymore. And step number 3, after we had the first 2 steps, step 1, address the emotion. Step 2, reduce the complexity. Step number 3 is you have to be good at public or professional speaking, especially here in public speaking. Rhetorics are very important. And I now give you an example of someone who's done it right. You most likely haven't heard of Mario Salerno. Mario Salerno is a landlord in New York City, and he owns about 200 apartments. Of course, when you own 200 apartments, you are by far you're not struggling. You are wealthy. But compared to what's happening in the real estate market, you are still no one. Especially in New York City, you don't play with the big brands. You are a landlord who owns a couple of units, in this case, 200 units. And then Corona hit. And now people, of course, wondered, what shall I do when I lose my job? Can I pay my rent? Will I be evicted? And at the moment, the US is facing mass evictions because moratoriums which were set up are now ending. Many of them will not be extended, and the US faces the worst crisis of mass evictions in its history. And already in the United States, more than 1 million households per year are evicted, which is a horrible number. And what Mr. Salerno said, because Mr. Salerno said that he's going to accept that people don't pay the rent for the upcoming month. He said, don't pay the rent, it's all good, just take care of your family, you don't have to pay a rent for a month. And he said it in the following words: don't worry about paying me, worry about your neighbor. And that is a professional statement how to address the issue. So step number 1, he addressed the emotion, which is worry. Step number 2, he reduced the complexity, and the complexity is I can't pay my rent, but I have to pay my rent. There are different laws in place in the US. What happens when I don't pay my rent? What about evictions? He simply said, don't have to worry about it. And then he rhetorically, in a brilliant way, produced what we call sound bites. Sound bites are the statements which make it on social media in a positive or in a negative way. And the statement, don't worry about paying me, worry about your neighbor, is a sound bite which sums it up perfectly. And when we see the emotion and how he brilliantly addressed this, these kind of emotions will also come up when we talk about something else which just happened today, because exactly today the Supreme Court in the United States ruled the law in Louisiana which made abortions illegal as unconstitutional. And that is not only an important moment, it's not only an important moment, because when we see how the decision-making process happened, and many people will say that's all legal stuff, it's all about the facts, it's only about the facts. That's true when it comes to the process itself. But especially a law about abortion, of course, this Louisiana law was wildly inappropriate. You can't make abortions illegal. And there is a main point why you cannot. When we see the whole process of how the decision was made, in most parts of this project, the amount of min in vote was 90, 95 or 100%. And I just want to make unambiguously clear, it is not up to men to tell women what they can and cannot do with their bodies. And that is a soundbite which now you can find on social media, and that didn't start yesterday. It is simply something where you know that you have to address the emotion, that you have to reduce the complexity of a factual situation, and that your rhetorics must be up to a level that you need to be professionally trained before crisis happens. And I deliver hundreds. During the last 21 years of my self-employment, I trained hundreds, if not thousands of people when it comes to public and professional speaking. And as a leader, you need to be prepared before the crisis happens. So when you are sitting down right now and you say, we are now getting to the end of the lockdown and things get back to normal, and how will we come out? How will we come out of this crisis? Will we attract talent? Can we attract talent? Can we win them? Can we retain them? Can we develop them? And of course, people who already work for you, they will think, do I still want to work here? Do I still want to work for that person? And there's always a very important rule, which I said before. People don't leave organizations. People leave people. As a leader, you now have to think, am I able to address emotions? Am I able to reduce complexity and still make appropriate statements without lying? And am I able to publicly and professionally speak in an appropriate manner? Your call. I wish you all the best implementing this, and for today, thank you very much for your time.